Okay, so before getting into actually putting together this simple geometric character, let's take a minute to make sure we know what to do in edit mode. So I'm going to hold down Control and push Z to undo the last few things that I did, get that cube back to the middle. Now, the object itself is selected, we can tell because of this outline. And in the last video we talked about how to manipulate the object itself, but we can manipulate parts of the object. And we can do that, first of all, by going into edit mode. And the way that you do that is by going up here to the top of the screen. There's a little drop down arrow where you can change which mode you're in. And usually we're going to work either in object mode or edit mode. The other items are more specialized. Now that we're in edit mode, we can see that rather than just an outline of the object, there are all these little dots, these points that we call vertices. And there are edges that are defined rather than the whole shape being outlined. Now we don't have to go up here all the time to switch back and forth from object to edit mode. There are shortcuts, a lot of shortcuts in Blender, and one thing that we can do is just push tab on our keyboard and toggle back and forth between object and edit mode. Now when we're in edit mode, we can manipulate the item in different ways. Right now you can see that I'm selecting just these vertices, and that's because I'm in vertex select mode. I can also go to edge select mode by selecting this button, and now I can select edges. And there is face select mode where I can select an entire face. So let's take a moment to discuss manipulating this object. So just like in the last video where we were able to manipulate the object in scale or position or rotation, we can do the same thing to the faces, the edges, or in some cases the vertices. And we can do it in pretty much the same way. So if I go to my buttons on the side with this face selected, you can now see that a gizmo showed up similar to the gizmo in the upper corner, and I can simply grab and move this face around, and the whole object sort of adjusts with it. Likewise, I can rotate it by pushing the rotate button and moving things around by selecting parts of the rotation gizmo. And I can do the same thing with the scale button. I can scale on a specific axis to get different types of results. Now that done, I'm going to push Control Z a few times to put this back to a more basic shape. And we can discuss doing this via keyboard commands. In the previous video we talked about how you can simply push G to grab, or S to scale, or R to rotate to manipulate these things as well. So same thing, if I push G to grab this, it'll move freely. And if I push R to rotate, it'll rotate freely, just kind of based on where I'm looking at it from. Or same thing with the scaling, just based on my sort of guessing where I want it to be. Control Z a few times to get back to our cube. And if I want to be more precise, I can S and push a specific axis. So in this case I'm going to push Y, and it'll only scale in that direction. Now, notice that I can sort of accidentally mess things up. I scaled in the opposite direction and created a shape that's kind of impossible. So those are things to be aware of when you're doing these things. I can grab this on a specific axis by pushing G. Let's say I want to move it away from me, so I'll push X. And I can do the same thing with rotation. If I push R and let's say Y this time, it'll rotate only this way. Now one more thing I want to note is there is another way of manipulating these items. I'm going to push Control Z a few times. And that's if you push the N button on your keyboard, you get these menus that show up. And I can adjust these transforms right here. So if I want to, I can either type in a number or I can use a slider to move things around in here as well. I'm going to stop there, and in the next video we'll start making a very simple character.